Hey, welcome to the Breakaway Podcast. We hope you enjoy the talks and stick around for more at the end.
Well, several weeks ago, we met in Kyle Field. You were there. And we did it because there was a career fair in this building. And as I thought about that moment, if you just kind of pull the lens back and think about that night, it was interesting to think. In one arena, there was worship going on of the Lord as we drew near him and trusted him. And in another arena, there were people pursuing a career and trying to get a job. And as you think about that, and I thought about these two arenas and these two circles, I thought these are major pieces of the college life. The Christian college student particularly, these are two massive circles of your life. On one side, there's this, I want to know God, and I want to pursue God, and I want to please God. And then on the other side, there's, I got to get a job. Like I got to pick a major and I got to get hired and what am I going to do with my life? And those kind of questions. And I've noticed with these two circles, for many of us, when we talk about them and think about them, they overlap, but not a ton. When I talk to a lot of students, there is overlap, but it's sort of like, all right, I'm going to get a job and give money to Christian things. Or this circle will overlap and they go, I'm praying and asking God to give me a job. And I'll be moral at that job. Like I'm not going to show up drunk. But beyond that, there's not much other overlap. And so the reality is when I talk to students, it's almost two completely different conversations of what's God doing in your life and what are you going to do as a career. There's not much overlap. But the reality is, as we look at the Bible, and particularly our text tonight, you're going to see that Paul says, not only do these touch, there's major overlap. And the reality is, worship should drive our work. And I know for many of us to think that way, we're like, I don't even understand how that works. Because when I think of work and I think I got to get a job, when you just say to me, hey, you got to get a job, the first thing that rises in me is fear, not worship. So how does that work? And there's a lot to say about it we won't get to tonight. But I want to enter into this conversation with Paul because he's going to show us how does the Christian walk into and Christianly go to work. And the reality is, if you haven't been with us, we've been looking at the book of Thessalonians, and this is Paul writing to a group of people who are brand new Christians. They just became Christians, and it's like this total rebooting of their life. They're like, okay, I just radically realigned myself in the universe under the lordship of Jesus. This changes everything. And as Paul's writing this letter, he's telling them yes. And the section of the letter we're in is him talking about, when you align yourself with Christ, the Christian life radically reorients how you enter into the world. And really, in the section we're in, he's going to say it radically reorients three areas. One we looked at last week was sex. This week is work. And next week is the end times. So it's interesting, if you ever just read 1 Thessalonians in a cursory way, there's a big section on sex and a big section on the end of the world. And so you read it and you're like, was he talking to the Thessalonian youth group or what? It's like all about sex in the end times. And then there's this little work section crammed in the middle. But the reality is if you look at it and step back, you go, actually, these are three major themes in any human life. Like, what do people really care about? If you talk to people, they care a lot about sex, they care a lot about work, and they care a lot about death. These are things we think about a lot. I mean, go to the magazine rack at your grocery store. And what's the magazines about? It's about sex, it's about work, or it's about staying healthy so you don't die, right? That's what it's about. And what Paul's doing in this section, and really all he's doing, quite simply, is saying once you've become a Christian, once you've come to know that God came to rescue you in the person of Jesus, that he calls you into his family, when you enter into that family, there's a new Christian ethic. And all Paul is doing is applying Christianity to your life, into the areas of sex, to the area of work, and to how you perceive your death. And so last week, he said, here are the basic Christian ideas. Here's how it applies to the most intimate sphere in your life, the bedroom. Now, this week he's saying, here's basic Christian principles, and here's how it applies to the most broad place, the boardroom. How you apply Christianity sexually and how you apply it in society when you step out into the world. That's what he's looking at. And basically in the text, what he's saying is this. When you become a Christian, there's two major driving forces that are deeply connected to the Christian. We live to love God and to love people. And so we started last week by saying, you live to please God, and so love God with how you use sex. Use it in a way that honors him. And then he said, and use it in a way that loves people. Use sexuality in a way that helps people and doesn't steal from people. And now this week he's going to move in and say, and when you get to work, it's that same thing. Love God, love people. Now let me just apply it to work. And how does love motivate work? That's where we are tonight. And I got to tell you something, as I thought about you and thought about this text, I thought about teaching this, and I realized this is not one of those sermons that's going to land like a bombshell. Like for many of you, you're probably not going to cry at the end, be like, he's right, I got it. It's not one of those kind of sermons. But Paul's going to tell you, for many of us, the way we pursue work is really driven by fear. And he's going to say, I want you to think about work as being driven by love. And I don't even understand how that makes sense. So what I'm going to teach you about tonight is it's a major area of your life. If you think about a given week, you spend about a third of your week unconscious, all right? And then you spend another third when you graduate from college, you'll spend it at work. And so the majority of your awake time will be at work. The question is, what does the Bible say about how you do it? And I think if you apply what Paul's saying here tonight, it's going to change your life. It's going to change your life. And so he moves into this, and he's talking about loving God, loving people impacts your sexual life. And then when he moves in here, he says, now concerning brotherly love in a general sense, in a broad category, brotherly love, we don't need to write to you. He says, you don't need someone to reteach you about this general concept because you got it. And I love he uses this term, brotherly love. It's the word Philadelphia, right? It's the actual word. So if you're reading through it in Greek, it just says, now concerning Philadelphia. And you're like, interesting. What's he going to say next? Like, they make great cream cheese. Film Brocky there. Remember that. But he's saying, no, now concerning brotherly love. And what's cool about that is in all Greek literature, that word is only used of nuclear family, your brother, sister, stuff like that. Paul takes it outside of just your biological family and says, hey, when you're a Christian, you're brothers now, you're sisters. Look to your left, look to your right, behold your family. That's your brother, that's your sister. And so if they're in need, you take care of them. And we take care of each other, and we look out for each other. This was a radical concept. And he says, so this huge category of now we're a family, now we're supposed to love each other like you would your own brother or sister, this category of brotherly love, he said, I don't really need to tell you you should do that. And then he says two reasons why. Number one is because because you've been taught by God. And I love it, he makes up a word there. Paul's the only one who ever uses it. He takes the word God and the word teaching and slams it together. Theodidactus. Anyway, forget it. He says, because you've been taught by God. And you go, what does that mean? Well, taught by God shows up in the Old Testament in Isaiah. Isaiah says there will come a day, God will usher in a new time in history where people will be taught by God in a specific and beautiful, different way. In John chapter 6, Jesus says that's time is here. He said, as the gospel's preached about me, he said the Father, and then he quotes that text, will do what he promised through Isaiah. He will speak to your hearts and tell you to trust me. And he says, Isaiah is about me, that God will come, and as you hear the gospel preached, it'll begin to work on your heart and convince you that you need Jesus and need to be in a relationship with him. And so Paul's grabbing those concepts, and he says, you don't need me to tell you, hey, you're supposed to love people, because guess what? You know that. Because when I preached the gospel to you, he said in chapter 1, the Holy Spirit of God went to work on you. That's what Paul unpacks in another text, 1 Corinthians 9. He says the Spirit of God comes and begins to convince you the truth of Jesus. And when the Spirit does that, he says in Romans 5, that God sheds abroad his love in our heart through the Holy Spirit that he's given us. Or he says in Galatians 5, the fruit of the Spirit is love. So what he's saying here is, when the gospel came to you, God began to tell you this is true. And when you realized Jesus isn't just a moral example, he came to earth, he came and became a part of our lives, and he came to rescue me, he came to get me. That's what the universe is about, is relationship, and God has come to grab me. When you realize that, he says the Spirit of God lands in you and makes you love God, and you're like, yes, I love him. And then not just him, you go, he came to rescue me, he came to save me, he came to save us. Look at you, he came to save us, bro. And we get all excited. And he says, the Spirit in you is teaching you to love people. And he said, I didn't even have to tell you people. You just looked around and you're like, get over here, you. And suddenly y'all are becoming family. And then he says in the next reading, he says, you're doing this all throughout Macedonia. He says, all around you guys are realizing Jesus saved us. We're this little Jesus crew and we're family and we can hang out and we love each other. And he says, great, you got that concept. He said, I don't need to give you the big concept of you should love people. I don't have to say, hey guys, you really should stop hitting each other. All right, stop stealing. He's just saying, I don't even have to tell you. You already love each other. It's great. But then he moves on and says, but I urge you, brothers, to do this more and more. He says, you've got the concept, but I want to call you to more. I want you to take brotherly love and drive it in deeper. And so it's cool. He's saying, you got the concept, but I wanted you to send it in deep. And he's about to tell you, this is how to become a varsity lover of your brothers. All right? I mean, I'm just no more JV. I'm going to make you a serious lover of the brothers. And you think what he's going to say next is going to be huge and just kind of epic and life-changing, explosive. And he says, this is how you deeply love the brothers. Aspire to live quietly. Mind your own affairs. Work with your hands. Or to say this, and this is a faithful translation, he says, you want to love the brothers? He says, then make it your ambition to be quiet and mind your own business and get a job. That's what he says. And so it's not the most passionate text. You know what I mean? Like I said, it's not one where you're going to be like, oh my gosh. It's like, love the brothers. How, Ben? Shut up and quit bothering people and get a job. Okay, all right. Now, if you're following along and tracking with me, you read that and you go, I don't get it. What's he saying? What does that have to do with work? And what does that have to do with brotherly love? But the reality is, if you look at the text, this is all connected. They're not two different subjects. This is all connected. This is how you love people. So you go, what does this mean? Well, I'll give you the principle, and then we'll talk about practical steps. That's where we're going tonight. So the principle he's saying is this, in a real general way. The principle is, when you step out into society, you as a Christian, when you leave here and go out into the world, the principle is this. I want you to be a productive force, not a disruptive force. That's what he's saying. When you, Christian, walk out into the public square, I want you to look and say, I'm going to be a productive source, a source of life, not a disruptive source, a source of disruption in the community. That's who I'm going to be. I'm going to be a source of blessing, not drama. And as a Christian, if I do that out there, if that's the guiding paradigm, I'm going to help people. I'm going to help the family. And you go, how does that work out? Well, for them, quite honestly, there's two places you can go to figure out what was going on with them. Acts 17, you find out that when Paul preached the gospel, he was calling Jesus the Christ. That means the anointed one. And it started a riot in Thessalonica. And at the riot, they dragged out other Christians and said, they're proclaiming a king other than Caesar, Jesus. And they made it a political issue. And it almost killed people. It got real dangerous. And so in a political sphere, he's saying, hey, make it your ambition, and these are political words, to live a quiet life and to mind your own business. He's saying, Christian, don't take your Christianity and use it as a chance to start a fight in the government, dial up the drama, become a disruptive person in the community, hold riots, light stuff on fire. Don't do that kind of stuff. You chill out. Because if you become disruptive, you're going to make it dangerous for us. And so take it easy. And then on another side, in 2 Thessalonians, you see that one of the issues in the community was people said, oh, Jesus is coming back. The world's going to end. I don't need a job. I got Christian brothers. They'll take care of me. This brother's got cash. I don't have to work. Yeah, Christianity. All right. And they're excited about that. And they're bums. And he says in that text, he's like, hey, if you don't get a job, you don't eat. All right. Go get a job. And he says, you need to be a productive source. You don't need to just sit back and mooch off society. He says, because when the outside world sees a Christianity like that, it puts us in disrepute. It makes us look bad if you're doing that. So don't do that. And so you can apply it very generally. You can say politically, don't take Christianity and make it a source of argument and yelling at people and making everyone the enemy and just kind of dialing up drama. And then don't take Christianity and be one of those people who just kind of sits in the back row at the church and critiques everything and criticizes everyone, but never lifts a hand to help. And so he says, and I'll just apply this very broadly and then we'll move on. He says, when you walk into a sphere, think about yourself this way. Actually, we could say it this way. There was an article in the paper a couple weeks ago about Texas A&M. And it was about a paper that came out that was an internal paper at A&M, and that is they went to each employee at A&M and they used some formula, I don't know how, to determine if every employee at the university was a profit center or a cost center. So they looked at every employee and said, are you someone who brings money in or do you suck money out? Are you a profit center or a cost center? Which is a pretty stressful thing to look at you and go, you're a cost center. I don't know how that feels. And I don't know what that document's for. And I'm not really going to talk about it. I just bring that up to go, they were looking at people and saying, do you bring profit or do you bring cost? What Paul is saying here essentially is you need to look at yourself. When you walk into your public arena, when you walk into your classroom, when you walk into your church, when you walk into your job, are you a source of life? Do you bring blessing? Do you bring productivity and peace? Or are you a source of disruption? Do you bring discord and disharmony and hurt people and are obnoxious? What do you bring? Or are you a zero? Do you bring nothing and you're not really making any kind of difference? He says, I don't want you to be a disruptive source. I want you to be a productive one. And when the world looks at the Christian community, I want you to be someone who breathes life into this world. A great example of this would be Daniel. Personally, I think that's what he has in his mind. Daniel in the Old Testament, if you remember, he was a Jewish boy growing up in Jerusalem until they were taken over by pagan Babylon, right? And as they were being hauled away to go live in this pagan society, the prophet Jeremiah said, hey, when you show up in Babylon, seek the shalom of the city. He says, this is the way the believer should act in pagan Babylon. We don't start a coup. We don't start an anti-Babylonian king movement. We don't try to topple the government. We don't become subversive terrorists and blow up buildings. We don't go after people. That's not the Christian mode. He says, how does the Christian involve himself in a pagan and lost culture? You seek the shalom of the city. And so David and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, remember that? They showed up, and what'd they do? They went to college. They learned what they had to learn. They got good jobs that fit their gifts, and they did great work. And they became these amazing sources of productivity in that culture. And then whenever the culture went crossways against their allegiance to God, they were willing to die for God. So they would work hard in the culture. They'd do everything they would ask them to do. It says their work was 10 times better than everyone else around them. These guys were awesome. And then they said, you guys are great. Bow down to the statue. And they said, no, sorry. But even in that moment, when they said, bow down to this statue of me, the king said this to them, bow down to it or else I'll kill you. They didn't say, well, go ahead and try. I'll kill you first. All right, like they didn't suddenly become angry. They didn't even complain. They said, King, we don't have any excuses for you. We can't bow to your statue, so if you need to kill us, go for it. God will save us or not, but he's God either way, and we're not going to worry about it. And they landed in a fire, didn't burn up, got out, and everyone's like, your God's the best. And they're like, we know. And they went back to work. And I got to tell you something. Daniel and those guys, they changed the culture. And by the middle of the book, you see Nebuchadnezzar praising their God. And so you look and you go, these little Jewish boys were parachuted into a pagan culture. And what did they do? They were a source of productivity, not disruption. They flourished in the culture, and they changed the culture. And he says, that's what you're meant to be, little yeast. I go dropping you into a city, and a couple years later we go back and Dallas is very in love with the Lord, or wherever you end up, Snook, or whatever. And you drop in, and you become this source of productivity in the culture, and you change it. Now, the question is, and really what we need help with is, okay, Ben, I got that. Thank you. That's the general principle. How? How do I do that? How do I become this productive force in society? And how does that ultimately love the brothers? We need to answer that question. Well, this is what you do. Here's the practical. I'm going to tell you what to do, how to do it, and the results, and then we're done. What do we do? 3 things. Number 1, the what is you work with your hands. Work with your hands. How do you love the Christians as you enter into this community? You get a job. But look at how. Look at the motivation. It's not getting a job that's revolutionary that you're like, get a job. No way. Like, people are getting jobs all over the place. I want you to see the motivation for why you work with your hands. It's the motivation that's revolutionary. He says that it's brotherly love. That you know brotherly love, I tell you to do it more and more, work with your hands. And so work is an outpouring of love. That's revolutionary because when most of us think about work, what comes to mind? Like if I said to you, you need to get a job, what comes up in you? Fear and anxiety. You're like, I do. Oh my God. Okay, don't panic. Believe in yourself. All right, like you panic, right? And most people, when they pursue getting a job, what is putting the energy behind the pursuit? It's fear. Now think for a minute, what's driving the fear? If you're scared you're not going to get a job or scared about getting a job, what's energizing the fear? Where does that fear coming from? Let me tell you what it's not. You're not afraid you're going to starve to death. Nobody in here, when you think, oh, I'm nervous about a job, I'm nervous they like me, you're not nervous that you're going to end up on the side of the road, about to waste away, and as you breathe your last, you go, I should have padded my resume. You're not afraid of dying of starvation. So what are you afraid of? What's energizing the fear? Think about this. What's energizing the fear? 2 things. Number 1 is financial security. You want enough money to do what you want. It's not that you're afraid you won't have enough money to survive. You want enough money to do what you want to do, right? I don't want all the money in the world. I just want enough money to do whatever I want, right? So financial security is part of it. And number 2 is esteem, approval. That I get a job that I can tell people I'm working here and they go, wow. Or I can show up there and I feel good about myself because I did it. Wow. And so it's either about financial security or personal fulfillment. I can look and I go, I mean something. I got this job. I'm important. I work at this company. We even name drop what companies we interviewed with just to be like, bam. All right, just kind of to tell people. Because why? It fulfills us. And so for most of us, the fear that drives us when we go searching for a job is financial security or personal fulfillment. What's crazy about that is that as you look around in our culture, we're very insecure and unfulfilled people. What's going on with that? I read an article the other day, and it says this: in the spring of 2009, Nathan Hatch, president of Wake Forest University, admitted what many educators have seen for years, that a disproportionate number of young adults have been trying to cram into the fields of finance, consulting, corporate law, and specialized medicine because of the high salaries and aura of success that these professions now bring. Students were doing so with little reference to the larger questions of meaning and purpose, says Hatch. That is, they chose professions not in answer to the question, what job helps people flourish, but what job helps me flourish? And as a result, there's a high degree of frustration expressed over unfulfilling work. Isn't that interesting? That when we go in saying, I got to find financial security and personal fulfillment, and if that's what drives you to get a job, where you end up is picking a job where you're not secure financially, you're anxious all the time about money, and you're not fulfilled. And you go, so where I'm pursuing fulfillment and finances and I'm not getting either, what's happening? You're doing it wrong. So what's the answer? He says, I want your motivation to not be these, because these are inherently selfish. Money for me, status for me. That's what I'm scared of, is I'm scared me will get smaller and everyone will look at me and laugh and go, me is a loser. And you're like, he is. And I'm just scared. I want to be awesome. And he says, that's the wrong motivation. And that'll tyrannize you. I want you to work with your hands. That's what I want you to do. But I want you to do it out of the motivation of love, because that changes everything. Because when you start thinking, how am I going to pick a job? How am I going to pick a major? If you're thinking, what do I do to try to fulfill me and get money? You're just going to stress out. But if you go, wait a minute, how do I pick a job that serves the common good, that helps the brothers flourish? Start thinking that way. You know what's going to happen? You ask a totally different set of questions. Not how much does it pay? How much fun I'll have? You don't ask those questions. You go, what will help the people flourish? What you'll begin to do to answer that is you'll look at two things. Number one, you'll look at how you're built. You'll look at my gifts. What do I do that can help people flourish? What can I be a part of that maximally helps the community? And that's the question you start asking. How do I, if God built me and God built me to love others, what can I do that will maximally help others? And you begin to pursue that and question that. And so it might be a high-paying job, it might not. But I want you to do something that you're gifted to do and passionate about doing. I don't want a doctor who's just treating me because they became a doctor for the money. You know? Because then I'm just a means to the end. They're like, well, I don't really care about you. Patients are just sort of this unfortunate thing I have to do to get to that paycheck, all right? I don't want that doctor. And not only do I not want that doctor, I don't want him to be a doctor. I don't want him to be moving around the medical community and they all know, yeah, he's a doctor, but he really hates it here. But he loves the Lord. That's weird. I want you to do something that you're built to do. You're good at. You flourish. And it may make a lot of money. It may not. That's not even an issue. I do what most benefits the community. And maybe for you it is medicine. Maybe it's being a teacher. Maybe it's doing construction. It's doing something that you go, when I do this, it helps the community flourish. And I've got friends that, I'll be honest with you, and I've said this before, I don't know thing one about money or numbers. Stresses me out. As a youth pastor, I lost on a regular basis a lot of money. Like physically lost thousands of dollars. And I remember going on a mission trip, honestly, and they were like, hey, you're a business major, we'll put you in charge of the finances. And the books were off by thousands of dollars. And they came back and they're like, what happened? And I was like, I don't know. I got scared and I don't know. And I hurt a Christian organization. I hurt an inner city ministry because I was doing something I'm not good at. And so you look and go, what am I good at? What can I do that helps the community flourish? That's the question you start asking. And then you start asking, not only what do I do, what's the work of my hands that's productive? But then you start asking, and where are the needs? Where are places where the social fabric's breaking? Where are places where my gifts can meet needs? Because maybe you'll use in this field, maybe that one, maybe in this country, maybe that one. It can be a spectrum. You don't know. It's not like there's this one job that's perfect for you. There's probably a spectrum. And you go, where are the needs? What do they need? And how do I apply my gifts to these needs? And when you start asking that question, that's when a search for a job gets fun. That's when it's not scary anymore. That's when it's, God built me to serve people, and I'm going to figure out how, and I'm going to see their needs, and I'm going to meet them, and we're going to win. That makes the search for a job fun. He says, I want you to do that. You find your gifts, you see the world's needs, and you put those together, and everybody wins. And that's what we're called to do. So that's the what. And you go, how do I do it? How do I go about work? So I search for work in a way that makes everybody flourish. Great. Now, how? Notice he says how is that you will win the respect of outsiders. I want you to not just pick a job that you're good at and meets needs. When you enter into the workforce, I want you to work in such a way that wins the respect of outsiders. I want your work ethic to be so that outsiders look and they respect the Christian. Now, what's interesting about that is, he's not necessarily talking about the kind of work you do, because he says work with your hands in order to win the respect for outsiders. The interesting thing is, for the Greek people, to work with your hands, to be an artisan, was seen as lowly and demeaning. It was seen as small. It wasn't seen as sophisticated. The life of the mind was sophisticated. So he's not saying here, Christian, go get the job that everyone goes, wow. And get that job that they go, you're awesome. You made it there. And you're like, I know. It's because I'm awesome and I love Jesus. Hey, all right, like, that's not it. He says you do work, and you do work that they may think is small. But you do that work in a way that they see your pursuit of quality, they see your pursuit of excellence, they see the way you handle the job, that it's not about money, and they look at you and go, that is crazy. Like, what's gotten into you? And they'll respect that. They'll see something, they go, there's something very different about that. I heard a story, I think it was about Michelangelo working on a piece of art, and working on a piece of it back in a corner, a statue or painting, I don't remember where, in a part where human eyes couldn't even see. And they asked him, why are you spending so much time on the particularities and nuances of a piece of art nobody will see? And he says, God sees. God sees. And you see, as he worked at art, he said, I'm going to pursue this with excellence because God values work, I will value work, and as I pursue work that way, people respect that, even if it confuses them. I've talked in here before about when I was at college, waiting tables. Waiting tables was not a job I was passionate about. And sometimes you have to work in a job that isn't just the union of all your passions, and glory and the needs of the world. Sometimes you just got to wait tables, right? But I decided I'm going to wait tables, and I'm going to wait tables for the glory of God. And I'm going to do this in a way that pursues flourishing. And I remember the first time I worked there, it was here in College Station. We showed up, and the company was opening, and they had a big meeting of all of us waiters and all the people who were going to work there. And it was interesting, as the meeting started, the room quickly, you figured out who's waited tables before, who were the veterans, and who's never waited tables before. And it became like this discipleship at the bar, And I remember there was one girl in particular that was telling stories. She's like, one time I had this six top and it was crazy. And all the young ones are like, teach me, a wise one. And it was like this weird thing happening. And I remember at one point, the most seasoned veteran waiter said to the young ones, she said, I'll tell you the worst day to work. She said, when? She went, Sunday, lunch. She said, all the Christians get out of church, and they're cranky because they're hungry, and they're the worst tippers. And they were all like, yes, okay, never work Sunday lunch, And she said that, and I remember that was really discouraging. And I remember walking out, I was day one at this job, and I walked out and I'm like, man, and I remember walking to the parking lot, and I didn't tell this girl I was a Christian. I didn't say anything or have a big cross on or anything, but I don't know how she could tell. But I was walking out, and this girl, other waiter, walked up next to me, and she was like, that was pretty depressing, wasn't it? I said, yeah, it was real depressing. And then I remember she looked at me and smiled, and she goes, well, let's change their perception. And it was like, you could hear the music start, like 80s montage, like, we will. And it's like, let's do it. And there was a little group of us Christians that decided we're going to work totally different. And I'm going to help you with your tables, even though I won't make money. I'm going to help you bust your tables, even though that won't make me any money. I'm going to come to work early. I'll take your shift. You need it. I'll clean up afterwards. I'll make everything look great. We are going to chase after this thing in a way that's unbelievable. I remember one girl came. She was this wonderful Christian girl. She showed up with a big crate of peaches. And she was like, my family grows peaches. And I was like, great. And she was like, try one. And I said, I don't like peaches. I hate them. And I remember she was this real sweet, real soft-spoken girl. And it was the first time I ever got any like sass from her. I was like, oh, I hate peaches. They're gross. And she was like, oh, you've never tried my family's peaches. And I was like, it's not going to matter, girl. All right. And she was kind of like, boom, handed me a peach in front of everybody. And I was like, it doesn't even, I bit into it. And I'm like, okay, that was fantastic. And then I kind of had to reorient. I was like, okay, apparently I'm now in the peach-loving camp with a lot of nuance. All right, I'm not fully in, but wow. And she came and she's bringing stuff for people. I remember for me, I would do odd jobs on the side. There was one time where the cooks had these grates above them, and these grates got covered with grease, from coming up from the grill, and it had turned yellow and then brown and then black. And the boss asked me, will you clean those? And I said, yeah. And I decided I'm going to make those things glow with Shekinah glory. And we took them out to this car wash where they have degreaser on those big guns, and we spent $10. We just turned up U2 and just spent a couple hours just be like, all right, and just began powering these things until they glowed. And I remember when two of those cooks, guys who didn't know the Lord, came back, and I remember they came up to me and they walked up and they were like, hey, dude, thanks for cleaning those grates. I was like, no problem, man. And they were like, no, seriously, thank you. I'm like, okay. I started walking up and they're like, no. And you could tell they didn't know what to say. They don't typically compliment, but they were like, no, really. Like, and it was confusing to them. You could tell it was a moment, and I'm like, it's okay. But they were looking, and they're like, I don't know why you did that. I don't know. I don't understand any of it. But you know what they did? Came to church with us. And they were open to the gospel. And I think you go and you do a job that you're great at, and even if you're doing a job that you're not, whether it's a great job or not, you pursue it with an excellence that outsiders don't understand, but they'll see as beautiful. You live a beautiful life. And the result will be, he says, and you be dependent on nobody. He says, I want you to be a community that's not a drain of resources, but you bring resource to the community. I want the Christian community to be people who don't sap energy from each other or the town. I want you to be people that bring energy to the town, bring flourishing to the town, that you are a source of life. Because when you do that, that's a way to love the brothers. You're kind in that restaurant, man, you're going to make Christians shine. You're going to make Christians shine. You're going to change their perspective. You shine at your job, you make it easier on all of us. We all win when you shine in your job. And then he says the result is we all flourish. We win. That's what the Christian does. So there was a man I met in college. He wasn't in college. I was. His name was John Perkins. And he grew up in the 40s and 50s as a sharecropper in Mississippi. Black man in a very racist South. And after a couple years of sharecropping, he decided, as soon as I'm old enough, I'm getting out of here. And he moved to California. And he moved to California because there's more opportunities of people of his color in that day. And he got a career, got a job, sending his kid to a daycare, found out his kid was quoting Bible verses. And he wondered what was going on, and so he went and he began to meet Christians. And he always thought Christianity was a joke and something for the weak. But he had never really studied the Bible. And so the more he started to study it with this group, he saw it was beautiful. And he became a Christian. And then God broke his heart for the people of Mississippi. And he moved back. And he moved to this little town, Mendenhall, and it had a railroad track. And you had one side with pretty houses and streets. And you had another side with shacks and no streets. But at the end of each row of shacks were two little honky-tonks, places where you could get drunk. And so he saw over here on the black side of town, he saw education was very low because girls got pregnant early. Because the only place for little kids to hang out were these honky-tonks. Guys would go to get drunk. Kids would go to listen to music. Girls got pregnant very young. And so kids were raising kids. And those kids had nowhere else to play but in the dirt, in the honky-tonk. And it was this vicious cycle. And he showed up in this poor, uneducated, malnourished, broken place. And he didn't start a coup, didn't start lighting houses on fire across the tracks. Didn't start to try to break them down or destroy them or get angry at them. You know what he did? He began to teach a Bible study and began to meet and teach people about the glories of God. And then he looked around and he said, you know what? We need a daycare. And so they had his wife and a couple other ladies start taking care of other kids so these young teen moms could keep learning and get an education. And as they began to learn and grow, he built a playground so kids didn't have to play in the bar anymore, but they could play somewhere healthy and be taught the Word of God and basic skills. Then they opened a thrift store so they could all change goods together. Didn't have any money, but they would all share their goods. You need a shirt? You got it. You need some crops? You got it. And they began to share with each other. And they built a daycare. They built a school. They built a thrift store. They built a general store. They built roads, I think. But I'll tell you what they did over the course of 20 years. They built a community. And they built a massive ministry that got noticed by the other side of town. And people began to come. And people began to come to Christ. And he changed a community with the gospel. Changed a town with the gospel. And then began to reproduce that in other towns. And I met him in Colorado at a church that was following his model and totally changing the city because they stepped into a Safeway that had closed because of crime. And they bought it, made it a church, and they were converting people. They were baptizing people who used to rob that store. And they came in and they said, we're going to go to places where the fabric is breaking. And we're going to be people who take our gifts and use them to make the community flourish. And so the outside world respects that. They're going to see it and marvel at that. And then we begin to flourish. We give to each other and don't take. And it's a way to love each other and to love the world. And when you work hard and you work with your gifts, the gospel goes out. Because at the end of the day, you know who you look like? You look like Jesus. Because Jesus saw a hurt and dying world and he stepped into it. And he didn't step into it to overthrow Caesar. He didn't step in it to destroy the Romans. He took on our weakness. He took on our infirmities. He took on our hurts. He stepped into our physical body. And he lived a perfect life. And he brought a community that when trusting him could find life in themselves. He lived the perfect life we could not. He died, sacrificed himself for us. He beat death and rose. How? By the triumph of God so he could produce a little community of us. And now we walk into a hurting world and we say, I'm going to do that. I'm going to look like him. I'm going to come where the world is breaking. I'm going to give my life and I'm going to see them grow. By the grace of God, for the glory of God, and for the good of my community, I will be a source of life. And that's my hope for us. Let me pray for us. Father, I just pray right now that you would begin to stir in people's hearts to just talk to you honestly about what do they think about when they think about getting a job. And I just want to ask you if you're up for it, just whisper to God, this is what I think about when I think of graduating. And for many of us, honestly, our paradigm, Lord, is very selfish. It's what do I feel like doing? What's secure financially? How can I buy things that make me comfortable? And that's as far as we've thought. And it's not that we're mean people. We get brotherly love. It's just we haven't had a Paul to push it in deeper and say, this is how it works in a job. And I just want to ask that your Holy Spirit, Lord, would do that right now. And begin to stir in us to ask that question and pray that question. Lord, how do I work out of love, not out of fear or selfishness? How do I work and pick a job that will cause my community to flourish? How do I work in a way that will make my community flourish? And then I want you to ask him, Lord, will you use my life as an engineer, a professor, teacher, a mom, a preacher? Will you take my gifts and how you built me? Will you aim me at some needs in the world? And Lord, may I be a source of flourishing in my neighborhood, in my town. And I pray people would come to know and love the Savior because of me. And Lord, I pray that we could be little communities all throughout Texas and the rest of the world, Lord, that look like Christ, who will step into a hurting world and be a source of life. And God, I pray for anyone in here tonight who thought Christianity was just be a good person. I pray you would devastate that thought. They would realize Christianity is realizing we're broken and can't fix us. And God stepped into humanity. Jesus Christ, the God-man, came in to live the life we could not, to die a death because of our sin, and then to rise from the dead and offer to let us be a part of his family. And I just pray the family would grow tonight. There'd be people who cry out and say, I want to be a part of that. And if you got questions, you can ask our care team down here on my right, your left, or whoever brought you. And then God, for the rest of us, even now as we serve in organizations and around campus or in work or whatever we do, I pray, Lord, we would begin to ask and pray. Say, Lord, please make me a place of productivity, a place of life, a place of flourishing for your glory and their good.
Well, welcome to this part of the podcast. We are glad you're with us, and we have made it through almost half the semester. I think we have one more week, Ben, and then we'll have reached our halfway point.
Really?
Yeah, so we'll double check that, but I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
But it's been great. Like, we've enjoyed being all over campus, and last night we were in Reed Arena, and continuing in 1 Thessalonians, and just was a really good night of worship. Jeff Johnson was back with us and brought his entourage and his fiance Jordan, who we talked about on the podcast last week from Caulfield.
Yeah.
And they were leading worship with your wife Donna, and it was just a really good night, and continuing to enjoy just what God's doing on Tuesday nights.
Yeah, and it was the last night of our live recording, we think, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And just thought it was a great night to capture that. I'm just excited about the progress on the CD and all that you're doing to guide that along. So I love what we are getting and love where it's going to go,
Yeah, it's exciting because it seems like more and more people are going, man, I really want to hear the Breakaway music. You'll talk about it on the podcast, and it's not fair. And so we're like, well, we hear you, and we understand your pain. And we're working to change that. So hopefully people will have our, songs that we're singing from Tuesday night to listen to on their iPods and cars and MP3 players, and the world will be better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But no, so it was really cool, and just wanted to kind of jump in here and not really draw this part of the podcast out.
Yeah.
Because we were able to hear you share that last night's talk probably wouldn't draw a bunch of emotion and tears and weeping and gnashing of teeth or anything, but it was something that was very practical, and I think I walked away thinking it was one of the better ones from the series. So
yeah. Mm-hmm. I'll say this because I can't get it out of my head. You know what's weird about that? You're right. We're about halfway, but there's only 4 talks left in 1 Thessalonians for more than halfway through the book.
Shocker.
I know. Because we'll have Go Missions, and then off Thanksgiving, then all worship. So I'll only do 4 more sermons on. Anyway, it's weird.
That is weird.
I know.
But it's the life of a college ministry.
Yeah.
We take a break for Thanksgiving.
Blast off, and then
we end. I think December 7th is our last official breakaway of the semester.
Sure.
But it's been so good.
Love it.
And I think practically for college students and the rest of the world, like, working in the idea of putting your hands to something and, getting a job or keeping your job or whatever it is that you're kind of, whatever phase of life you're in.
Yeah.
This hit home for everybody,
Well, it is, because like we said, I just did the numbers myself and just going, okay, there's 168 hours in a week. You spend about 50 of them unconscious. Mm-hmm. You spend maybe 50 hours a week at work, and then you spend, roughly 50. It doesn't work out 50, but I'm doing that for simplicity. Roughly a third asleep, a third at work, and a third elsewhere. But even that elsewhere third, a big chunk of that is on your way to work or on your way back to work. So work is this huge piece of life. Mm-hmm. And for so many people, work is a means to an end rather than something with meaning in and of itself. I'm getting this job. Why? To get money so I can buy what I want? To get money so I can do what I want? Or to get a level of esteem in my peer group that is valuable to me? And we don't cherish the work for itself, you know? And you go, that's not biblical. The Bible is God crafted an earth, and every day he said it's good. He loved what he was making in and of itself. And he told Adam, take the raw materials and cultivate it and make it more alive. And so we're meant to go at our work with a passion for the work, you know? And so some people, the only overlap with Christianity too is, okay, I'm supposed to just do whatever I do, I don't know, and then, you know, give a Bible to my coworker. So I'm supposed to sort of be an evangelist at work. And the answer is yes, you're meant to be evangelistic at work somehow in a way that fits. But you're also meant to be passionate about the work because God gets his hands dirty in creation. God stepped in to creation and redemption. And so we step in and care about what we're doing, the objective work. And I just think there should be a Christian passion about work. That's what Paul's saying here. Like, it's interesting thought, what he's presenting to them. Like, if you drop a Christian into a culture, what should they do? Should they rage against the culture and start a coup? No. Be quiet. Don't be this revolutionary force in the sense that you're trying to overthrow. If you notice, Christianity in the first century was not an anti-Caesar movement. It could have become that. It wasn't. And so I don't like when people try to make Christianity into a political movement. Should we vote? Yes. Should we care about politics? Yes. There's a political responsibility within Christianity, but it's not essentially a political deal. It's I drop into the culture and I become someone who's going to make it flourish. Mm. And what I do is I find something to do where I flourish in the work, and then I'm unapologetically Christian as I do it.
Cool. So question,
yeah,
how do you figure out what you flourish in? I know some students, you know, especially college students go, hey, like, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. How do I figure that out kind of thing? And I think when I was in college, which was a long time ago, believe it or not, I'm not in college, but when I was, you know, the average student changed their major twice before they landed on something.
I think it's more now.
And I think it's more now. I don't know what the statistic is, but, you know, people are trying to figure out, like, what am I good at? What do I like? How do I put all that together? And, you know, what do you say to the student that's like, I just don't know what I'm good at, or I haven't figured that out?
Yeah.
Or maybe they kind of know what they're good at, but they don't know how to, like, put that into a practice kind of thing, you know? It's not like, hey, Ben, tell me how to get a job. It's like, hey, how do I figure out this whole thing, you know?
Yeah. That's a good question. And if you have thoughts too, let me know. It's in just an interview Ben moment with this either. But I think, you know, one, I tell students sometimes when I talk to them, they'll seem real pressured about it. And I'm like, when else were you going to figure this out? You know? Were you going to do it as a junior in high school? Or you're thinking about totally different things in high school. Like, it's a small percentage of people that as a sophomore in high school are like, I will be a dentist. You know what I mean? Like, you don't know. Mm-hmm. And so college is the time to, so I meet students who beat themselves up about that. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And they feel like they're a loser. And you're like, don't do that. This is what this is for. It's okay. Like, it's okay to be struggling with that. And I tell them all the time, I graduated college not knowing that I was built more to teach. I didn't know that about myself. So I even made it out of college unsure. I had a general idea more than when I came in, but it wasn't this fully solidified thing. So it takes time. And I think what you do is, I think you excel at the revealed things. That's what I think you do. You look in the Bible and go, what does God tell me to do? I'm going to love my neighbor. And that's a real broad thing, but I'm just going to do it the best I can. And I'm going to get involved in the believing community and serve there and let people know me and know people. And then I'm going to go out and make the most of every opportunity. And in my interactions with outsiders, I'm going to work as if working for the glory of God, not for men. I'm going to adorn the gospel with the way I go about work. And so I think you just kind of get in there and mix it up. And so I tell students do that, like get a job in different fields. If you think you might be interested in something, take a class on it, or go work in that lab, or go, I took a geology class because I got an offer to work in an oil company, and I thought maybe I'll be a geologist. I mean, that seems like a joke right now.
People are probably laughing in their car.
Oh my God. But I was like, I don't know. So I took a geology class, and about 2 months in, I realized I don't want to do this ever again. I kind of like being able to drive down the street and go, oh, that's a schist. That's bauxite. Actually, I don't remember what bauxite is. But anyway, so I don't know, man. It's not my deal. You know what I mean? But I didn't know. I didn't know that. And, I was a business major, and it was midway through that I realized I'm so bad. I remember sitting in an economics class, and a friend of mine sitting next to me and goes, you seriously don't understand this? And I'm like, no, I really don't get what he's saying. This is so confusing to me. And I just realized, I think I'm not built this way. And so I think what you do, all that to say, I think you do a couple things. As you're doing that, what happens is you become a student of yourself, and you start to see broad categories. I move more this way than that way. And then as you're in a believing community, people amend those categories. They go, I see this in you, I don't. You seem to be good at this, not as much there. We really are helped when you do this. You know what I mean? And that's when you just start to move. So right out of college, I became a youth pastor, and I hired a guy, and I was his boss, so he would try to look like me. And it took a little while for him to realize I'm not built like Ben at all. And the way we figured it out, we were laughing one day at lunch. I said, or I actually don't remember which of us said it, but we said, if we had an hour to do whatever, I would go read a book. You would drive to someone's house and invite yourself in and sit in their living room for an hour. I said, I would never in a million years do that with a free hour. I'm too kind of awkward socially to ever do that. Just drive by and say hi. And I love that about you. I think that's wonderful. And you look now and you go, he's doing that kind of thing. He's pastoral in that way. And I admire that, and I appreciate that, and I needed him on staff. And I'm built different. But we had to figure that out. You figure it out by doing it. So anyway, I guess I'm kind of going on and on, but you get the idea. I think you mix it up. You get feedback of people. But I think that the driving question you need to ask is not, where will I find the most fulfillment necessarily? It's, where will I be the most service? That's ultimately how I made the decision. It was right up until senior year. I'm either going to become a guy who really loves Jesus in the business world, or go into vocational ministry. And I really wasn't sure which to do. I really struggled. And at the end of the day, I thought, if I go in the business world, the best Ben can do at whatever business we do, the best I could do would be okay. It'd be okay. I said, and I don't think the world needs that.
That's good.
And that made the decision for me.
I think it's all about your viewpoint, like how you approach it. And so if you approach work and the idea of work from a very selfish point of view, where like, how can I, like you mentioned, how can I receive or get pleasure or money or accomplish things? How can I do these things? Then it really does take you on a path that doesn't bring life or joy. But if you approach it from, how can I really serve and not take, and what kind of service can I offer that would really encourage and build up people, and you approach it from that viewpoint, it changes everything about it. The salary doesn't matter as much, the workload doesn't matter as much, because even here in the Breakaway office, like, who would have ever thought that you and I and 150 something volunteers, along with Janine, who works with us, would be doing this, Yeah. God has different plans, and we would not be here if we were in it for the salary. And we wouldn't be here if we were in it for, a very normal rhythmic schedule,
Oh my gosh.
Working with college students is tough, but it's so awesome. And when you're doing it as a, hey, how can I really serve? God, where do you want me? It changes things. So I think that viewpoint, the way you approach things, the approach is so different for the believer, for Christians. And it takes the stress off, honestly, because when I was graduating college, I didn't have a clue what I was going to do. And somehow I landed in like kind of youth ministry, the same type deal.
Yeah.
But the last thing I would say is like, doesn't mean you don't work, if you don't know what you're going to do. And I would say always be looking to work, even if it is waiting tables or whatever, it's like work hard at work.
Yeah.
And then God will reveal through different jobs and maybe some failure, where you're best fit,
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And that's where I think right now you stay in school. If you're like, well, I don't like my classes, don't quit school. Stay in it and just keep learning. It'll build perseverance and character to stay in school and finish. Mm-hmm. But it just gives you this unprecedented opportunity to keep joining different organizations, keep taking different kinds of classes, but keep pushing towards a major as well. Because what'll happen sometimes is even if the major doesn't fit you, you still learn more about yourself in it, So like I was getting a business degree and there was so much I didn't like, I thought about getting out of it. But then when we started doing projects, I just suddenly realized when we're doing them, if there was a leadership vacuum, I'd step in. And if there was a teaching element, I could do it. I could translate. I could take text, sift through it, and translate it to people. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay. But I learned that pursuing a degree that I almost quit because I didn't love marketing particularly. But I was learning about myself. But what I think is interesting about it is, like you were saying, it's weird because most people think, you pursue a job that gives you fulfillment. That's what you want to do. But if you aim at that, I thought that Wake Forest quote was so telling. These students are aiming at that, and then we have higher numbers of students reporting back being unfulfilled at work. Because if you're just pursuing selfish fulfillment, you pursue something that makes you feel awesome or look awesome, and that's real vacant. But if you go, how am I built by God to do work that helps people, is productive in the world? And then when you realize I'm contributing, I'm actually doing something, guess what you get? You get fulfillment. So you get fulfillment by not aiming at it. That's what's so beautiful about it, is you look and you go, yes, yeah. And that could mean, I want to say this too, fulfillment could be, being a youth pastor, or it could be working in robotics. It could be building roads. It really could. So I don't want to intimate to any student that I think certain professions are more valuable than others. Some professions are objectively bad. You can get in jobs where you go, this is not a good job. Like what you sell hurts people. You know what I mean? So there are jobs that you can say, this is objectively bad. Mm-hmm. But there's many jobs that are objectively good. Mm-hmm. And you can go about them in a good or bad way. So I talked to a friend that was like, I love making music. Is that not helpful? I'm like, music is tremendously helpful. You can enter the music industry and pursue music in a really unhealthy and vacant and broken way. Or you can take the objective good of music and harness it for the common good. Mm-hmm. And
we've talked about this before, but a lot of times people will choose a profession that fills a void in their life. And we see that sometimes with youth ministry, and youth pastors will go into kind of that mode of like, I wanted to feel accepted and cool because I didn't get that maybe growing up. And so these kids think I'm cool now, hopefully. And that's a wrong way to pursue work as well, Yeah. So you can kind of go at it the wrong way, but I really feel like the approach and like your motives for what you're doing really matter. And the only way to kind of make sure that those are pure is to be prayerful, and then to have good people around you who, like we've said a lot, like don't think that you're awesome, and that will really tell you like what you're really good at and what you're really not good at.
Yeah.
so that you don't have yes men around you and yes women around you, but you've got really genuine, caring community. And that is huge, I think.
Totally, man.
So do you have any like things that helped you in that process, like books that you read, or even just things that were helpful? I know I read The Practice of the Presence of God by Brother Lawrence. And
Yeah.
that was just a very kind of practical little encouraging, shorter book to read that really changed your perspective on what you do with your work, you know.
That is the second time that book has come up today.
Mm-hmm.
It was a good book. I read it in college too. I really liked that one too.
Mm-hmm.
You know what helped me? I read Christian biographies in college.
Mm-hmm.
And it helped me just in the sense that I read about these people's lives and I saw, because I got the books based on God used their life.
Mm-hmm.
They had a good life. And then I would read about them and go, they didn't know what they were doing. But they trusted the Lord, and the Lord's a good shepherd and guided them. And that really calmed me a lot in college of going, okay, I'm where they were on, usually when you read these books, like by chapter 2, you know, I'm like, I'm in the early chapters and I don't know. And that's where they were. But they trusted God, and God's a good shepherd. In all your ways acknowledge him and he'll make your path straight. And I thought, I want to do that. And so I really take his word seriously, and I do the best I can. I do what it says. And I think when you do that, like you said, you get good people around you. You're doing good things. You slowly he starts to reveal things to you of, hey, when you do this, it all makes sense. When you do this, you can kind of do it, but it doesn't click along quite like when that guy does it or that girl does it, you know, and you start to learn. But don't panic.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited about the next 4, I guess, that we have left
Yeah.
over the course of the next 6 weeks. But
Yeah, we're coming for a landing on the book.
we are.
Go Missions is going to be great too. That'll be a little different feel, but it'll be awesome.
So that's in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
We'll be at Central Baptist, and it's more of a conference feel because we invite like people to come early before the 9:00 breakaway moment, and doors open at 6:30, which means I think there's I don't know how many mission type agencies that'll be represented. I don't know if we have final numbers yet, but we have lots of mission opportunities for people to connect and tables set up and that kind of thing. And then a couple breakout moments where we'll have speakers that specifically talk about different regions of the world and also some social justice stuff. And I think people are even coming right now to... No, I'm just kidding. we record this in your office, and you've got lots of windows, and people just kind of walk by and chat. It's great.
We have a very active sidewalk.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
But so, there'll be breakout sessions both at 7 and 8 o'clock. Those are like 45 minutes long. And so people get a chance to go to 2. They can pick 2 if they want to, or just go to one of those. But it'll be great. And then we start breakaway at 9 with our special guest speaker / friend who's just down the road from us, Afshin Ziafat.
Yeah. And Afshin's a great guy. And for those who haven't heard him, he's always really inspirational and encouraging. And it's just going to be fun to have his voice kind of speaking to our students. We love having him. It's going to be great. And a wonderful story of what God's done in him and through him, man. So
Cool.
yeah.
And our very own Aaron Ivy, worship leading friend, will be there as well. And so it'll be a good night. But that's in 2 weeks from this date. And we are preparing for that. So pray for us and pray for all of the speakers and students that will be attending. And I think that's kind of all for announcements.
I feel good about it.
I do too. So thank you guys so much for joining us. We count it an honor and a privilege to be able to do this. And so thanks for listening, and we look forward to being with you next week.
Definitely. See you.